in a moment. Welcome to the Cape and Islands State Senate debate at Monomoy Regional High School. My name is Charles Kiernan, and I will be the moderator tonight. We're privileged today to have 5 candidates attending. We welcome the Republican candidates Jim Crocker and Tony Schiavi, and the Democratic candidates Julian Sear, Sheila Lyons, and Brian Mantle. I ask the audience to hold all applause for the remainder of the debate. We thank the candidates for taking time to be with us today. The format of the debate will start with opening statements from each candidate, limited to 90 seconds. Then our panel of students will ask questions which the candidates will answer in rotating order. Responses will be limited to 60 seconds. 30-second follow-up responses may be allowed by the moderator. We will end with concluding statements limited to 90 seconds. Our timers up front will monitor the length of the responses. Sarah will put one hand up with 15 seconds left and another up when time is up. This debate has been organized and the questions developed by our senior AP government students. The candidate's position on stage has been chosen by lot. They will speak from the audience's left to the right. Julian Sear will give the first opening statement. The next will be from Tony Schiavi. You may begin.
Thank you. My name is Julian Sear. Thank you. It's really nice to be here tonight in Monomoy High School. Grace, thank you for, I don't know where Grace is, but thank you for the tour. This is quite a space, and really is not far from where I got my start in policy and politics. On a stage not as nice as this at Knoxville Regional High School. Our stage isn't this beautiful. But I first got involved in policy and politics when I was 16 years old. I was a junior at Knoxville Regional High School 15 years ago, if you can imagine. And we had pretty big cuts to our school budget that would, if left unfilled, would result in 40 teachers being laid off. I was a pretty bookish, quiet kid at the time. I organized an effort to get adults and get taxpayers at Fort Town meetings to fund those schools, and really caught the political bug. And have been in public service ever since. Studied public policy and community health. Got to work for some pretty awesome places, the Clinton Global Initiative, the Obama White House, worked for Governor Patrick for a long time. Really got to understand how you make change in state government. And I'm running because I see the opportunities that so many of the Cape Codders that I grew up with were able to tap into, and that those are slipping away and those are eroding. And that as a community we have become profoundly unaffordable, or becoming profoundly unaffordable. And so that's why I'm running for state senate. I really look forward to seeing 2 hands, lots tonight. This is not a long time. And thank you to Monomoy for organizing this debate.
Next up will be Mr. Tony Schiavi.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tony Schiavi. I'm a resident of Harwich. I spent 30 years in the United States military, 20 of those right here on Cape Cod, at Joint Base Cape Cod. I have a very diverse set of skills, perhaps maybe different than most folks on this stage, but nonetheless, during my long career, I'm a veteran of Operation Desert Storm. I did 3 tours over in Southwest Asia, but also was in charge of operations at Otis Air National Guard Base during 9/11. But we also went through a very significant turmoil at the base back in 2005 with the base closure announcement that came out. And that's really when I really got heavily involved with working with our local officials, our state officials, and our federal officials to try to preserve the jobs and the livelihoods of over 1,500 people and their families. And it was a very emotional time. It was something that I really grabbed onto and found very rewarding as I worked my way around Beacon Hill through that effort, and also down in Washington, D.C. I knew that when it came up to retirement for myself, that I wanted to continue in government. And so when I retired from the military in 2013, I took a job in local government as a town manager and police commissioner and did that for 3 years and accomplished a lot. And what it really showed me was that working hard and working together, we can solve a lot of the problems that exist in our communities. And on Cape Cod, we know we have challenges with jobs, with housing, with our environment, with sustainability. And I bring that diverse set of experience, and I run on a leadership, experience, and accomplishment platform that working together, we can solve the issues that are facing all of the towns that make up our district, including the islands. Thank you.
The next opening statement will be from Mr. Brian Mantle.
Good evening. My name is Brian Mantle. I'm the state representative for the 2nd Barnstable District. For the past 4 years, I've had the honor and privilege of representing the towns of Barnstable and Yarmouth in the Massachusetts House. I'm running for state senate because I believe that we need an experienced legislator to be our senior elected official on Beacon Hill. I think that it's important that we have someone who not only has a track record of passing laws, but also someone who has a proven record of delivering results. If I'm elected state senator, I will work to improve addiction services and treatment services as well as mental health services here on Cape Cod. I'll try and do my best to make sure that the folks on Beacon Hill know that the problem that we're dealing with here is quite frankly an epidemic when it comes to opiates. I will work to preserve and protect our groundwater, which is our most valuable resource here on Cape Cod and which is intrinsically tied to our economy. Without healthy groundwater and without getting on top of the wastewater crisis that is looming out there, we quite frankly won't have an economy or a Cape Cod that's anything like what you and I know. If I'm elected, I will work to establish universal pre-K and try and reform our broken public schools funding system. I realize that we'll have a lengthier discussion here tonight, but if we don't have the chance to get back to it, I would like just to say thank you again to the Monomoy students and to John Dixon for having us here this evening.
The next opening statement will be from Mr. Jim Crocker.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting tonight. Congratulations, seniors. It's all over. Good job. Good job. Everyone asks me, why is it that I want to run? Why is it that I insist on putting myself and my lovely family and my wife of 30 years here tonight with me and my daughter? It's really because there's something that's been instilled in me by my family. My grandparents served, one of my relatives was the first clerk in the town of Barnstable. My grandfather was elected as a sheriff, another grandfather was elected as a tree warden and as a water commissioner. My mother was a town meeting rep, my father was a board of health guy. When you come from that background, they teach you that it's honorable and it's the way to give back and it's the way we do business. It's the way the community stays strong. I have 28 years of service, elected service, more than anybody here, between town council, fire and water. I'm a Title V septic inspector and I understand more of the septic issues than anybody here today. And I'm prepared to work at all this to do more for our community. My opinion of what's wrong in Beacon Hill is nobody wants to go back and look at the bills and make the bills better. Old bills. We're not going to pound the desk and get new money from Beacon Hill. We have to go back and revisit the issues. I want to tell you, you can get the bug once you get involved in politics. I wish you all well, and thank you for hosting us tonight.
Thank you. The next opening statement will be from Mrs. Sheila Lyons.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming out this evening, and thank you to the students and to Mr. Dixon for hosting this. It's very important that our young people become engaged and understand that our government is here to work for us. I was taught that as a young child, and that's why I'm standing here today. I was born working class, a devout Democrat. Parents who taught me that it was my responsibility to really go forward and give the opportunities and ensure those opportunities that were given to me as a child and as a young adult, having had a father die at a young age, having safety nets in place. My family would never have survived without them. Through the years, I dedicated myself to social work and to the community. I have a child, I became a mother, and during my motherhood, I became even more involved and participated in electing good people to office. I I then came to Cape Cod and I was elected to the Wellfleet Democratic Town Committee, the Cape and Islands Democratic Council, and I worked very hard to get good people elected here. And then I ventured my toe into the Assembly of Delegates and heed Mr. Crocker's warning, once you go there, it is hard to pull out, and I never thought I would be standing here as a candidate. However, I believe in our country and I believe in our democracy. I believe that our country is here for us to use and to our benefit for all people and not just the choice few. So we'll be talking more about these issues tonight, and I thank you.
All right, our first question will be asked by Maggie, and the first response will be given by Mr. Schiavi.
As Massachusetts updates schools testing, do you think that passing a statewide test should be a requirement for graduation? Do you have an opinion on which test is best?
What was the very last part?
Do you have an opinion on which test is best?
Oh, which test is best? I certainly believe in standards. I was a pilot for most of my career, and you had standards, and so I believe in standards. I believe that, Massachusetts, we have probably the best educational system, I think, in our country, and I think it's important that we determine what those standards should be versus some of the things we've heard about using national standards, because I think when that happens, let's be realistic that they're made for all of the states, and I think it's important that as we look at our students as they get ready to graduate, to make sure that they're competent in the basic skills that we expect from our educational system, that there should be standards, but I believe that Massachusetts should set its own standards, and so I am for a test that's Massachusetts driven, Massachusetts built, and centered around the way that we educate our students versus perhaps what happens during some of these national standardized tests that are out there, because I think we can do a better job of that and making sure that we adequately test our students so that we know that they have the best competencies to go out into the world, whether they go to college or not.
Thank you. The next response will be given by Mr. Mantle.
To answer your question, I do believe that we should have some capstone test at the end of high schools here in Massachusetts. I would support the MCAS standards over the PARCC or the Common Core standards. I believe that Massachusetts has been a leader in education across the country for the past 40 years, that the recent push towards both testing standards within students as well as teachers has driven us away from actually learning as opposed to teaching to the test. I believe that these constitute unfunded mandates, and I would like to see us return to a point in our educational system where we're not so focused on our standardized tests and a comparison amongst schools, but rather just ensuring that all of our students grasp the knowledge. And I think that it's important to have some metric for doing that at the end of your high school career.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Crocker.
Thank you very much. I do not believe we should have a test to get out of high school. I believe we should be tested through the process and through the years. I do believe that MassCap had a better program than what we're seeing under the current, and I also know that the SAT and the ACTs are starting to compete with each other. So there seems to be some wide open area here for us to do better, to redevelop something that is Massachusetts-based that'll bring us back to a higher standard.
Thank you. The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
Yes, I look at testing as really, it should be a guide and an indication of where a student is and how can we fill those gaps for that student and ensure that they are being properly educated and that they are getting the supports where they're the weakest. I don't think standardized testing should be there to judge a school system, or the student or the teacher. It blurs what we're trying to do, and it does stifle creativity in the school. I think maybe doing a baseline test with students when they first enter school in that year, and then you'll know where they're lacking and where they will need help, and you can monitor that as the year goes on. I don't believe that you have to have that test to graduate college. I think you have grades and performance and a history that helps you graduate. As far as which test I think is better, I have been in classrooms that were showing me how they were implementing core curriculum, and I have been in some when they were teaching to tests. I can't say that I have the experience experience directly or enough experience or knowledge on it to feel comfortable in saying which I prefer. But I do believe that we should have it. Time is up. I think I've made myself clear. Thank you.
So I was part of the first. Where's my mic? Oh, I can't figure it out. I was part of actually the first class of students to go through the Massachusetts system that had a requirement for graduation, a requirement of taking the MCAS to graduate. And at the time, it felt like a pretty fair, reasonable thing. You took it in sophomore year, you could try again in junior and senior year. There were some students who it was really hard to pass that exam, but they got help. In the years since, we've really expanded our testing burden. I talk to my friends who are teachers, both here on the Cape, teachers on Martha's Vineyard, and teachers in some of the toughest schools in the state. And you're talking about our kids, young people spending 2-3 weeks doing standardized testing. I think broadly, I support some standard, but I think we've gone too far. I think we do so very little poverty alleviation more broadly in our society that we ask our schools to do a lot. And in a state and a country where funding for public education, which in this state is considered a right, is tied to basically property taxes and the assets of the town, there's a fundamental inequity there. And I don't think standardized testing can do everything to close that gap.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Kristen, and the first response will be given by Mr. Mantle.
Should charter schools be expanded? What other reforms should the state adopt to improve public schools?
I do not believe that charter schools should be expanded, or at least I don't believe that the cap should be reached. We're not currently in a region of the state where the cap has been reached, and far be it from me, for certain parts, for not being at least sympathetic with people whose children are in schools that are failing. But here in our region on Cape Cod, we have cooperative relationships between all of the towns and the schools. So there's what they call school of choice. And charters, as far as I'm concerned, as far as reform goes, we really need to fix our Chapter 70 formula. We need to stop relying on property tax. We need to fix the charter funding so that we're not taking funding away from brick and mortar schools so that we can essentially subsidize smaller classrooms. In terms of other reforms with charters, the intent of charters was to share the lesson. I'd like to see the lessons that have been learned from these charter schools before we actually start to consider eroding our traditional educational institutions.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Cropper.
Thank you. Could I have the question again, please?
Should charter schools be expanded? What other reforms should the state adopt to improve public schools?
Thank you very much. I would agree that it assumes that the discussion about charter expansion is available or a consideration on Cape Cod. There is room within the cap, so we all know that is a reality here. The high cost of structures and a traditional way of doing a school probably prohibits any great expansion immediately in the Cape and Islands area. Whether that's the answer to all of us or whether we need to visit charter schools at a different level is still to be determined. We've had some great productivity out of the charter schools, and the other thing that I would really like to see in the school issue is the MSBA, Mass School Building Authority. It's been raising $1 billion a year for the last 10 years. It's been successful, but it hasn't been focused. It's like making its own decisions on structures of its own kind. So I think perhaps some harnessing of that would give us some more money and put it in the proper place. Thank you.
Thank you. The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
Proponents of charter school expansion have done a very clever thing this year where they have really focused it on inner city schools. So to say that you're against this is almost denying children in inner city, urban, poor areas the opportunity for a good education. And I am not, that's not the way I want to be presented. I do not believe in charter schools because I believe that they take the resources from public schools. Our public schools are one of our great institutions started here in Massachusetts. We need an educated electorate to go forward with our government and to be able to solve the very big issues that are facing our young people here today. So I believe that the $1 billion that are going to be taken from the charter schools from the public schools to the charter schools should be reinvested in our public schools. Take the best practices of our charter schools, apply them to all of our public schools that also provide special education and services that the charter schools do not. It is more equitable, it is fair, and it should give everyone opportunity.
So the 1993 landmark education reform that established charters in Massachusetts was meant so that charters were going to be spaces, nimble, flexible spaces where we could apply lessons that could then be brought back into the public schools. That hasn't happened. There's been a breakdown between communication between charters and districts. I think there were some really good proposals that came out of the Senate compromise bill that was passed. No one seemed to be terribly happy about it, which I think is a good sign of legislation, of good legislation. Ideas around, tying charters more closely back into their regional schools. I think more broadly, we need, so I do not support lifting the cap, to be clear. I think broadly for school reforms, we need more revenue for our schools, and I think for the Cape and Islands, I don't want to, I'm going to be up here and say, I'm going to fight for more Chapter 70, but I also know, I can do the math, and I know how many members we have in our delegation. I think the other kind of piece we really need to look at is really tying our public system into our community college system and having a continuation there.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Tony Schiavi.
Thank you. As it comes to charter schools, charter schools were first designed to help raise the bar of our public schools, and I think they've done that. If there's a need in urban areas to have the cap lifted on charter schools, that might be appropriate. Here on Cape Cod, I feel we have enough diversification in education between our public schools, our parochial schools, our academies, and our charter schools that raising the cap on the Cape is not necessary. And so I'm not in favor of broadly lifting the cap across the entire Commonwealth. All of our schools here in the Cape, I think except for one, are level 2 or higher. But there's also an inequity when charter schools is a net deficit between the charter school sending tuition and the charter school receiving tuition. And anything that's going to impact the education of more than 95% of our students who are educated in public schools, that is a problem in my mind. And so that needs to get fixed. As far as reforms go, we need to fully fund the special education circuit breaker to make sure that we're educating our special needs students, as well as making sure we're fully funding the transportation needs of our regional school systems. As the state, encourages regionalization, and then they fall short of ensuring that we can, in effect, transport our students where they need to go. And so those are at least two things that I would do, as well as addressing Chapter 70 shortfalls based on our high valuations.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Sam, and the first response will be given by Mr. Crocker.
Do you support raising the minimum wage to $15? Beyond this, what can the state do to reduce homelessness and poverty in Massachusetts?
Great questions. Currently, we're about to go into the highest minimum wage next year with the bump. And certainly $15 an hour is unprecedented and certainly has no economic feedback for us yet. So we need to look at how this recent bump affects the small businessman. I think you really have to concern yourself about who really ends up with the benefit of a entry-level bump. We're looking for quality jobs, we're not looking for entry-level jobs. And I worry that the combination mix for small businesses may be lopsided with too high of a minimum wage.
Thank you. The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
I do believe that we have to increase our minimum wage, and I do think that $15 in this day and age is a reasonable sounding number, but it is an arbitrary number, and it does not give a livable wage, nor did any minimum wage that I was aware of in my life. However, I am concerned about small businesses here. I am concerned that there has to be protections and allowances for they to be able to grow and not have, you have a small business, a seasonal business on Cape Cod, you're going to have 4 people, you have to pay them $15 an hour, and then you may be facing some sort of paid leave. This is a burden for our small businesses. However, we do need to pay people what they deserve and give them the dignity of work. the work done, which has not been done in quite a while. As far as the second part of your question about relieving homelessness, there are ways that we can loosen resources from the top by closing corporate loopholes, by bringing resources from the top money getters or the ones where the money sort of gravitates to, and bring that down and get into our system.
So I support an increase to the of the minimum wage. And I have this perspective as someone who grew up in and of a small business. My family owned a seasonal restaurant in Toronto for 28 years. Grew up in the business, kind of doing everything imaginable. I think what we found as business owners is that you have to pay folks a decent enough wage just to retain workers here on the Cape. Frankly, I think a $15 an hour minimum wage doesn't, as far as the Cape's affordability concerns, isn't going to address the whole problem. People are making $30 an hour here on the Cape and aren't able to make it, especially people who don't own their own property or are unable to find affordable rentals. I know two of my friends who open and own successful small businesses who already pay all their staff $15 an hour. I'm actually more concerned with nonprofits, and there's something called compression, where it's a complicated term, but basically means that people who've been working for a long time would then be paid the same amount. And in nonprofits where there isn't a lot of leeway in the budget, where we have a lot of employees actually in Cape Cod, that's kind of another area of concern. But I think raising the minimum wage is something I support, and I support it going to $15 an hour tied to inflation.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Tony Schiavi.
I'm not in favor of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I think, the effect of that we're already seeing in states that have actually done this already. Where are those jobs at? I mean, a lot of them are in, places like fast food restaurants, those type of things. And we're already seeing those companies looking at technology that's going to replace actual employees. And it's sort of insidious because we're seeing it in the grocery stores and other places where it's hard to find a person to actually check you out because you're using technology to replace employees. And we have to be careful. If we raise the minimum wage such that it ends up losing jobs, what we really need to do is work on the economy of Cape Cod to bring higher paying jobs to the Cape. Certainly, I own two small businesses myself, an electrical business and a construction business. And when you have entry-level carpenters, tradespeople that are skilled, making 18 to 20 just starting out, a $15 minimum wage also puts pressures on those businesses to then raise those wages. And when you look at increased payroll taxes, there's more impact on the small business person than just raising the wage, the minimum wage up to $15 an hour. And I think we need to be very, very careful with that because I think it can have a very negative side effects if we're not careful and we're not thoughtful about it. As far as homelessness goes, I think I'm out of time.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Brian Mann. I'm sorry?
Could I get a readdress, please?
At the end, yes.
I would support the $15 minimum wage with exceptions. I believe that this should only apply to big box stores, multinational corporations, and fast food restaurants. I do believe that there should be limitations or restrictions, rather, so that it doesn't apply and put people who own small businesses, closely held family businesses, or seasonal businesses out of work. The risk here is balancing, because when we force employers to raise the wage, it always bumps up against automation, which is what Mr. Schiavi is referring to. The efficiencies of technology can certainly replace some things, but at the end of the day, I do believe that we have a responsibility to do this. The wage that I voted for a year ago is the highest wage in the nation. Next year, when Massachusetts enacts the next phase, it will raise up to $11 an hour. I think that that's appropriate, but just like a rising tide lifts all boats, and trickle-down economics always works, and that's sarcasm. I think there really needs to be a fine medium here so that we don't overburden employers and at the same time drive them away, but give people a living wage.
Thank you. I will allow a 30-second follow-up from each candidate, starting with Mr. Cropper.
Thank you. I apologize I dropped the question on the homeless portion. I'm currently sitting on a homeless committee in Barnstable, and the statistics of what is causing homeless is not minimum wage. So I want to make clear that I don't feel there's a correlation between minimum wage and homelessness. We really have an addiction problem, we really have a mental health problem, and we really have people who are just trying to drop out of society, and that's different. Thank you.
The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
Thank you, Jim. I agree with you on that. I do think that there is a addiction and mental health problem, which is sort of a reflection of a cultural problem that we have. However, when it does, just to finish my thought on homelessness, we can use our tools of government to close tax loopholes, to hold corporations accountable for the incentives that they are giving, to put taxes on the very wealthy, those making annual incomes of $1 million and more. Those resources can then get funneled into our community, reinvested into ourselves, and will help the economy in general. Thank you.
Homelessness is something that I think we've actually grappled with here in our communities for a long time, but really, especially in the Mid-Cape, it's become very, very visible. I think as someone who's worked in Health and Human Services, who's worked with the Department of Public Health, what I really see is we have all these silos of services, silos of state agencies that are funding procurements, that are giving services to different nonprofits largely who are doing this work. I think we need to find, especially here on the Cape, we need to find a way to have coordination, greater coordination. The contracting system for the state should be reformed to make that kind of coordination happen. And I'd like to see that and would work towards that.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Schiavi.
As it relates to homelessness, I've been doing a lot of research on this because I believe you don't have to always reinvent the wheel. And we do have a lot of silos. We need to connect all those together. But what I'm seeing as I read different studies around the country is when you can address the home part, the resident part, and permanent residents first, and then bring the services in second, which is kind of opposite of what we're actually doing right now. They find a much higher success rate in keeping folks that are chronically homeless actually housed longer than cycling in and out of homelessness to transitional facilities and back to homelessness again. I think that's something that we definitely need to look at and something that I would certainly pursue if elected.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Mantle.
So 30 seconds is far too short a period of time to adequately address homelessness, which is far more nuanced than just people who are living in the woods. There are homeless people on Cape Cod who live in this community, in every community, and certainly they've become more visible in the Mid-Cape area. But I believe that one of the things that we should be doing is thinking about the kind of society that we ought to be and that we want to be, and that we have a responsibility, a social contract, if you were, to care for our brother, and that that responsibility should include economic opportunities, educational opportunities, and closing loopholes so that we can actually, and changing local zoning regulations so that we can improve our affordable housing stock.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Ashley, and the first response will be given by Ms. Lyons.
Do you support the ballot question that would impose a 4% state surtax on incomes of over $1 million? Are there other changes to the state tax code that you would support?
Yes, I just hit upon this question. I do believe that we should do this, and if you make $5 million, I think that we could go more than 4%. This has been a skewed economy. There is the 1% that has the bulk of our income that has been generated of the economic recovery has gone to 1%. 95% of the economic recovery has gone to the 1%, while the 99% of us are still struggling and kind of feeling a little like things are a little bit better, but not feeling it at home. We can go further by closing corporate loopholes, by holding corporations accountable. If they say they're going to bring in jobs, they're going to improve our infrastructure. Whatever the incentive and the deal is made with state, that has to be monitored. It can be toned down, and there has to be clawbacks for those situations that have not, those corporations that have not met that.
So yes, I support the Fair Share Amendment. And further, I think we really need to have a conversation, an honest conversation about revenue in our state. I think I can use the word hungover in a high school. That I think we're still hungover from from being Massachusetts, where we were in 1973, 1974, Massachusetts now in taxation is about right in the middle of the pack, 24th, I think, last time I checked in the nation for taxation. So what I've seen is someone who's worked in and out of state government, working in services that everyone wants to see, food protection, radiation control, making sure, there's safety and public health, of really having to make tough decisions around, we need 15 food inspectors just to meet the legal mandates in state law, but we only have 9. And so what do you do about that? And I think there is this mantra of no new taxes, no new fees on Beacon Hill, which is politically convenient, but really disingenuous to what government needs, especially as our healthcare costs keep increasing and funding for almost every other state service does decrease.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Schiavi.
I am not in favor of the Fair Share Act. First, I don't think the bill is very well written. It's kind of innocuous in terms of, what income over $1 million is taxed. We know there's Part A, B, and C. It doesn't really address that. There's also some questions about the constitutionality of it that I think will get addressed at some point in time. But we also have to be careful with tax policy. At a time when we're trying to bring folks like this into our state to help create jobs, those are the people that are coming here to create jobs. They happen to be a very mobile part of our society. They can do this anywhere. And, we just saw that in Connecticut when their tax policy, happened to make GE pick up and move out of Connecticut and move to Massachusetts. So I think that's something we have to be very careful about and making sure that we don't, enact something like this when it's not necessarily all that well thought out and how it's going to have an impact on our economy. Because if it has a negative effect, then we're actually probably doing more harm than good. And I'm a believer in, looking at efficiencies and reform before we raise taxes. Governor Baker closed a $1.9 billion gap that he was handed without raising taxes and balanced the budget. We need to look at efficiencies in our state government before we raise taxes on any of our citizens.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Mantle.
So last week I actually did, in fact, vote for the Fair Share amendment. This is something that has to come up in front of the House twice before it can move onto the ballot because it's a constitutional amendment. I do support it. I don't think that, I don't buy into the fear-mongering that this is going to drive millionaires out. And if it does, I think it's really just driving greed out. I think that when you look at taxes historically, and people say they want to go back to the good old days. Well, the good old days had taxes that were far in excess of what is being proposed on this very wealthy class of people. So as far as the no tax, no spend mantra that has been alluded to this evening, that's also I voted for the gas tax because we needed to make improvements in our roads and bridges. I voted against the tech tax because I thought that it would hurt our local economy. I think what we need to do when we look at taxes is to think about the majority, not the 1%.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Crocker.
Thank you very much. I think all we have to really do is be able to do math to look at this one. What you're saying is if they could find 2% savings in the budget they're now looking at, they would raise the same amount that's projected with this tax. So instead, we'll alienate a class, we'll put ourselves at a disadvantage for competition of pulling in these larger corporations, all in the lieu of taking the easy out. When was the last time you heard any of our legislators put forward a cost-saving measure? I can't think of one. This seat we're all running for, it didn't put one up in the last 6 years. We need to get back to good management. That's how we solve our problems. That's how we get AAA rated. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Maggie, and the first response will be given by Mr. Sear.
Should the state set up safe rooms for heroin users? What should we be doing to turn the tide on opiate crisis?
Great question. As a public health person, I think I am encouraged by what we've seen as some of the steps around around restricting prescriptions and others, but I'm pessimistic that we're not looking at this epidemic in a way that's going to truly have an intervention that's going to make a difference in the broader epidemic. This epidemic is behaving like an infectious disease. And what we know is that for people who are able to recover from opiate addiction, and not everyone is able to recover from opiate addiction, those people have a continuum of care that starts with an acute detox that then transfers to a step-down program that then is long-term treatment. I think we need long-term treatment to be covered 60 and 90 days by health insurers. For a start, I still don't understand why no one in Beacon Hill has raised that. And to your question on safe rooms, I'm someone, as a public health person, as a harm reduction person, I need to learn a little more about this, but I think that we have a really good record in public health. Harm reduction has a really good record in public health, and although politically it seems something that people are scared of, I think I'd really want to look at the data there, and if the data is showing promise, then it should be considered.
Thank you. The next response will be for Mr. Schiavi.
Well, certainly the opiate epidemic is very complex and it's wide-ranging. And it's going to take a collaborative effort from healthcare, treatment providers, diversion, public safety, aftercare providers, which I think is what Julian's referring to. Because for folks that are recovering, it can take a year or more, not just 60 or 90 days. But we also have to look at better ways to educate folks, because if we can put effort into education, not just students and children, but parents, doctors, and prevent somebody from being addicted in the first place, we save so much in anguish and human cost, as well as the other costs of healthcare and the impact on the healthcare and public safety and all of that. And I think that's very important. But we also have to fix some of the laws. When you have things like Suboxone, but you only have certain doctors that can prescribe it, you only have a certain number of patients that doctor can have, it doesn't make sense to me, because any doctor can potentially write somebody into addiction, but only certain doctors can potentially write somebody out. That doesn't make sense to me. And we need to look at programs like the sheriff has, using Vivitrol, other types of treatments. And I think at the end of the day, hopefully someday we can actually predict which people have a tendency to be addicted and perhaps have non-opiate based treatment and pain management for them.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Mantle.
So the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. And I would suggest that that is what our war on drugs has been. I believe that we have failed across the board. And to answer your question, at this point, I don't think we're ready yet to go to safe rooms for heroin. However, I think that we should be moving towards a decriminalization of drugs and treating opiate addiction like a disease. We call it a disease, yet there's no treatment beds here on Cape Cod. We call it a disease, but the insurance providers that we have don't cover any treatment for it. We call it a disease, but yet it's still very much stigmatized in a way that most diseases are not. Contrary to one of the candidates' points, this is not an infectious disease. This is not contagious. This is an epidemic that has been spreading, and it can be brought under control by education, prevention, and putting more of our resources, as Mr. Schiavi said, into educating both the general population as well as physicians, because we know that the #1 cause of heroin addiction in this state and around the country is prescription drugs that then lead into addiction. So.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Crocker.
Thank you. Could I have the question again, please?
Should the state set up safe rooms for heroin users? What should we be doing to turn the tide in the opiate crisis?
All considerations have to come to the table, and all players and stakeholders have to come to the table. There is not one of us that has the answer at this point. We just got classified up to having the most highest death rate in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And so we need to bring more people to the table. We need to study all these issues. Those issues, though, do not get a free pass over the alcohol addiction and over our suicide rates. So we have health and service issues that are extreme and the highest in the Commonwealth here on Cape Cod, and we need to address them as best we can, but not without all stakeholders at the table. Nobody's had the answer to any of these before. Every single player who gets into the system chooses how they venue themselves and how they exercise their rights within those systems, and that causes different outcomes. This is a very difficult problem, but we should never stop with alcohol or suicide either.
Thank you. The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
I happen to agree with many of the statements here. If I was a parent with an addicted child, I think I would want to feel that they were at least in my home safe if they were going to do this, but that's not really the answer. What we need is to get our children off of this and never to really have them exposed to it in the first place. We have to look at how did this happen? There was a concerted effort by the drug companies to change the mind of doctors, to change the attitudes of the American Medical Association, to change the practice of giving pain medication. It started in 1987. Doctors weren't going for it. They saw the properties. In 1996, there was a concerted, paid-for, advertised, focus group effort to change the mind of people who administer medication. This should be looked at. This is very similar to the tobacco problem. We have to hold those drug companies accountable. We need to do prevention, education in our school system, as we did with tobacco. And alcohol does exist with a capital A. We are ignoring the fact that 17% of our population is admitted alcohol users in Cape Cod. None of the discussion that's going on is helping or focused on that. So we have to take a look at this question in a broad way.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Kristen, and the first response will be given by Mr. Schiavi.
What should be done to address healthcare costs? Should Massachusetts consider adopting a single-payer health insurance system?
So I'll answer the second question first. Again, I'm not a one-size-fits-all kind of person. I think we have to put pressure on our healthcare providers to make sure that there's controls related to healthcare costs, because we know it's a budget buster for families, it's a budget for businesses, and they keep going up. And it's in the healthcare, and it's a broad way. It's not just the treatment providers, but it's our pharmaceutical companies and the bills that they charge for their medications. I think we need to make a concerted effort to make sure that both our healthcare providers, that there's competition, and that competition, and we force them to drive costs down. And some of the health groups that I've been involved in, that's exactly how we did it. We basically told them, look, we're not going to allow any more additional enrollees in your plan unless you get your costs under control. And so if you can create competition within the healthcare industry and use that as leverage, for lack of a better word, to help drive down costs, because it is really hurting our families. It's hurting all of our everybody that has health care. We need to make sure that everybody has adequate access to good health care at an affordable cost.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Mantle.
I believe that Obamacare fell short, that we need to go to a single payer. And I believe so for a variety of reasons, one of which is that our nation is being destroyed by profit-mongering insurance companies. I think we need to really take a hard look at reforming our reimbursement rates for Medicare and Medicaid in our state and make us competitive with other states. We're having a difficult time recruiting physicians into our state because it is, quite frankly, difficult to practice medicine here. Our insurance rates are high, our reimbursement rates are low, and the fact of the matter is that fewer people have access to health care. Now, we've done something in Massachusetts before anyone else in the nation, and we had Romney Care before we adopted Obamacare. But the reality is that when you look at the number of people who are being served by our mass health, some of the cuts that Governor Baker has proposed making are, quite frankly, callous, and I believe that it is in the interest of our society as well as our region in this area that we adopt a more progressive policy of a single payer. We should stop competition. That's not going to help anybody but the people who hold stocks.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Crocker.
I have completely the opposite opinion of single payer. Any of our inside structural analysis of our financial taxation or payments would never, ever support single payer. So to talk about single payer when you don't have a financial structure that can support it is a serious waste of time. And we have real problems on the horizon. We have lobbyists that open up the commissioner's office for discussions when it comes to health care. So you get one group comes out for the hospital, you get one group comes out for the insurance people, and it's a public process. When we all have insurance for our homes and for our cars, no public process, no open doors, we don't even get to know what the rates are. So there's not a fair balance here between what we're doing for the bigger institutions and what we're doing for ourselves. And when you start to look at a drop in mass colleges that says 10% of a drop, but the budget only goes down 2 or 3%, the budget's being jingled so that we all can pay for health care. We got a huge economic problem in health care.
The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
So I have to agree that most of our costs are going to insurance companies, and there was a time that government had much more of a say in this, and when insurance companies were not driven so much by board, chairmen of the board, shareholders, and profit for those shareholders. And this is really a problem we have across all industries, that we are really making sure that those who hold those seats get their share, and they like to have large shares and we have less share. So this is something that the government can do. Insurance is a middleman agent. We can directly take care of this through hospitals, government. Hire those people with the government. They would have a good job. They would have a good paying job. They would have a good retirement plan. And we would all undoubtedly benefit from lower costs. It is the insurance rates in health insurance that is stagnating small businesses all the way up. It is killing our municipalities. It's killing our governments across the board, which seems to be maybe part of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Sear.
So I've actually really sink my teeth into healthcare costs. 3 years ago at the Department of Public Health, working on Chapter 224, a law essentially that tries to move our healthcare system away from fee-for-service to global payments. And it's a good start, but I think what we've seen in Massachusetts is that although we've done a good job under Patrick Care, because Governor Patrick was the one who implemented it, of covering people, that the costs are just getting higher and higher. It's eating a bigger and bigger and bigger chunk of our state budget. We were talking about the budget needs earlier. The piece that's increasing here are health care costs and making sure that every belts are tightened for almost everything else. And so I think, as a state, if you look at the amount we're paying already, at some point, that cost for single payer is going to, when does that kind of tip? And I think I support single payer, but I think we have built such a mess that it's going to take years and many more bills like Chapter 224, many more bills like Patrick Care to unravel this and get to a point where you need health care, you're able to get health care without 1,500 forms and a whole host of barriers that keep people from getting health care and that make people sicker and then increase our costs.
Thank you. The next question will be from Sam, and the first response will be from Mr. Mill.
What should Massachusetts be doing to protect fish stocks in the small boat fishing industry?
Fish stocks is obviously a big issue out in this region and pretty much the outer Cape. The unfortunate thing about fish is that they don't really concern themselves with state boundaries. And they don't care if they're in Massachusetts or Rhode Island waters, but yet we have rules that prohibit particularly smaller fishermen from competing. I believe that what we really need to do first is do a better stock assessment, particularly with some of the species that are declining. I know our ground fish have pretty much all but been wiped out. There's hardly any cod in our bay, and we're Cape Cod. So moving forward, I think the most important thing is that we get a better understanding of the migratory patterns of fish, because climate change is changing where the fish are and where they're located. Just a few years ago, the Black Sea bass were more essentially concentrated around Maryland, and now they're off our coast. We have restrictions that don't permit them to be caught, but the folks in Maryland would be able to catch them if they were down there. So I think this is a more nuanced question, but something that will require cooperation with other states.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Crocker.
Coastal economies. It's the biggest, best, cleanest economy we can produce for Cape Cod. Coastal economies not only will look at fish, they'd also look at the shellfish issue. We had a great article in the Cape Cod Times this week about the smaller boats being able to get to scallops and really making an opportunity to pay their way here. We also have to talk about the availability of growing seaweed in some of our areas. Maine has gone from 5 growers of seaweed to 15 in a 5-year period. There's all kinds of economies that we have to look at, but they're all tied to the coastal economies. We have to really work on numbers. We have to understand how to have this clean effort with us. And we have some of the smartest people in the United States right here in our backyard, and we need to harness that power to come up with better standards. Stock standards for the fish and for the shellfish, and as well as other options for these people to earn a living at the sea. The coastal economy runs Cape Cod.
Thank you. The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
I do believe that there's ways that we can somehow transition or help fishermen while stocks are hopefully growing. Part of our problem with our fishing stocks across the globe is that there are a lot of people. And what the United States puts into place, or even state boundaries, are they are not followed by other large companies of other countries. So this is, our waters are sort of this global public place, and it's very hard to control that. But we do have to look and respect our fishermen here. It has been the tradition of our culture and our economy. They spend a tremendous amount of money just being licensed, regulated, and their equipment. It's mind-boggling what you have to put up front to be a fisherman, just a single fisherman today. So we have to look at this and help them. I do not have the answer, and I do hope that I will have more of an education on this before even August. But it is something that we can work with, and we should, and we really do need to help our fishing families.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Seeger.
So when I was growing up, my dad and our restaurant would participate in something called the Trash Fish Banquet, which I think was an effort, maybe it was to support the AIDS support group, I forget what it was, but it reminded me that actually, I think we need to look to how to develop a market for species that are traditionally not popular, but that may actually be a real source of growth for our fishery. We've seen this with the whelk, in whelk fisheries in a few parts of the region. I had actually heard of the whelk several years ago, but folks don't eat a lot of it here, but there's a huge demand for this mollusk. This mollusk in China. I think with aquaculture we have a real advantage here. We have been, doubling the amount of aquaculture, oyster, mussels, clams output that we have been putting out as a state, and specifically in this region, every few years. We need to continue that. I have some pretty extensive experience working with the Division of Marine Fisheries and other state players in responding to a pathogen, Vibrio parahemolyticus, that threatened to shut down oyster harvest in summer months. I think this is a really interesting, cool space where there's a lot of opportunities, despite the pretty significant challenges.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Schiavi.
So I think there are obviously some difficulties in our fishing industry, and I've spoken to a number of fishermen, and Commissioner Lyons is correct. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on them right now. Everything from, federal inspectors being on their boat and having to pay these folks to count how many fish they get. But one of the things they brought up to me was, the whole fish assessment and how that's done, because these are moving objects, right? And so there's some question about, how accurate are these assessments. And I think we need to make sure that we're not sort of over-assessing the problem. We want to make sure that we keep our fishery stock healthy, because that is their livelihood, but we should help them to diversify in their business so that when the stocks are low or they can't fish for a particular type of fish, that they have the equipment and perhaps the training to do other types of things, whether it's the aquaculture, or whether it's fishing for a different species, or perhaps shell fishing, to help supplement the kind of normal fishing that they do, because it is one of our core things here on Cape Cod and the islands. The Nantucket folks mentioned the same thing to me, and so we need to look at that and see if there's ways to either change state law or work with the federal laws to make it easier for them to actually do that and continue to make a living and not break their bank with some of the things that are really over-regulation in terms of inspectors and the kind of positioning equipment that they have on their boats.
Thank you. The next question will be from Ashley, and the first response will be from Mr. Crocker.
Do you support the marijuana ballot initiative? Is there a connection between marijuana use and the opioid crisis?
I do not support it, and I do not believe there's a direct relationship between the two. I think the marijuana incentive is the wrong idea at the wrong time. If you look at the way the State House has handled a number of these ballot initiatives, they've been jumping out in front of them and trying to solve some of the problems, and that's what we saw with some union wages with the nurses. We've seen that kind of behavior. This one was a hot potato that didn't want anything to do with it, and this one's going to go through the ballot process, and we're all going to run on it, and it's going to be in the forefront of all of it. But no, I have not been able to find any science that directly relates the marijuana initiative to the opiate issue. Thank you.
The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
Yeah, well, I agree with Jim Crocker on that. I don't think that there is a direct correlation. You know, at a certain point in our country, there was, you know, in the 20s, opiates, opium, marijuana. These were just drugs that were out there available, and at some point we made a decision as a country to regulate so many drugs and to make them legal. They're nicotine, alcohol, sugar, and we subsidize all of these things, and these are all things that are hurting us in max. And we left out marijuana because I'm sure back then it was probably in the jazz houses or something like that. However, it is now part of our society. I do not see the correlation. I think if we have legalized alcohol, we can look at ways to legalize marijuana. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it is going to be tied to the opiate situation. I do think that there are 4 other states that we can look at, so there is time to revisit this in the future if it's not passed by the people of Massachusetts.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Seer.
My understanding on the data, the research that we have on this is a weak correlation between marijuana use and then opiate use. I think on this issue, if you talk to most anyone in my generation, we broadly support this, and I think we say, what's the big deal? I think there was mention earlier of the war on drugs, which has broadly, I think, been a failure. I pretty agree with that. I support broadly recreational marijuana. I've got some specific problems with how this bill is written. The ballot initiative, has a number of things in it. It ties, basically the number of dispensaries you can have is tied to, in each town is tied to a ratio to the number of liquor stores that you have. So for instance, in Provincetown, we could have 4 dispensaries. We probably don't need 4 dispensaries in Provincetown. We probably already have 4 dispensaries in Provincetown. So I think that, really, I think that if this does get on the ballot, and there is some question whether or not they're going to be able to get enough signatures to get on the ballot, but if it is getting on the ballot, I think it will be adopted, and I look forward to working to sort of tweak this if I'm lucky to be in the Senate, because there's some specific concerns in the way that it's written, that it's just a poor bill that will need to be improved.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Schiavi.
Thank you. I am not in support of the ballot initiative. I think it's a mistake. We are facing one of the greatest public health crises with the opiate epidemic. I think there is a correlation, whether it's weak or not. I guess that's for some, a scientific study to determine. There's probably some out there, and it's just not the right time. You only have to read the information coming out of Colorado and some of the states that have legalized marijuana to see the negative things that are happening. It would be bad for Massachusetts, bad for our children. They've seen a rise in traffic fatalities. It's not the big tax boom that everybody says it is. It has driven up the black market marijuana, because how are you going to tell the difference between what's black market marijuana and what's grown in some secure facility somewhere? Because people work around that, and so it's not a good public decision to do that at this point in time. Our public safety officials don't have adequate ways to determine OUI drugs. There's just a lot of problems with it, and I am not in favor. I think it'd be a big mistake. This is one of those things where we don't want to be a leader. We should wait, see how things develop in other states, and my feeling is that we'll probably not do it if we fight against it hard enough, because I think it's a mistake.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Mantle.
So in general, I support the concept of recreational marijuana being legalized, but with regard to this specific ballot initiative, I don't believe that it's well written, and partially because it doesn't tax marijuana enough. I'm one of 12 legislators who were the first sitting legislators in the nation to propose legislation to legalize marijuana before it had come before the people for a vote. I believe that marijuana has almost no connection to the opiate epidemic, certainly no more than alcohol or tobacco, which are the gateway drugs of our society. I think that if you look at marijuana, it has been marginalized in part because of old policy, and it's, quite frankly, the rollout of the medical marijuana has been atrocious. I don't believe that it's going to pass because I think there will be an effort, and I'm fine with that, but I think that ultimately we should recognize that marijuana is really far less dangerous in many ways than alcohol, and that once we move towards that position, I believe that we should be raising the tobacco age up to 21, and at the same time legalizing marijuana at the age of 21, so that there's no confusion as to people who consume it, whether or not they're 18 or 21.
Thank you. I would just like to ask all the candidates again to please respect the time limit so we can get to as many issues as possible. The next question will be from Maggie, and the first response will be from Ms. Lyons.
Do you have a plan to reduce the cost of public higher education in Massachusetts? How can we afford to give more support to our public universities?
I can't say that I have a plan, but I will work on a plan, and I do believe that we have to put more money into our public universities and our college, our community colleges here. Here on Cape Cod, we need access to a four-year education. Our best way of entry to that is through our community college, and that is a way of partnering with our high schools. And looking at our public education is a way of looking at how can we build our economies within the regions that we live. So if we put more money into our local universities and in partnerships with universities through Cape Cod Community College that is now partnering with the UMass system, I think that we can start to look at future generations. How are we going to rebuild our economy with the resources that we used to rely on Cape Cod? We were always a self-generating economy through our resources, our fishing, our agriculture. That can happen again, but we have to look at protecting our resources in the sciences and matching those so that we can educate our young to have good paying jobs to protect the land we live on.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Sear.
Wow, plan. You guys are ambitious. You should be up here and giving us a run for our money. I like Sheila, do not have a plan specifically for this. I've primarily worked with the Department of Higher Education, which is essentially an agency that provides services to the various colleges and universities and community college programs, in my time as chair of the state's LGBTQ Commission. Specifically here, close to home with Cape Cod Community College, one need that I'm really eager to work on is the college has had this $36 million STEM building that's been in the queue to be built. It would be a facility that would really allow for job training, allow us to really capitalize on our blue economy. And it's held up in an agency called the Division of Capital Asset Management, DCAM, just to get a $2 million study of whether or not this building can go forward. So that's kind of the things that I would, at least as a freshman senator, work towards, and then I'll get back to you on the plan, maybe after a year or two, or 10.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Schiavi.
Yeah, ditto on the no plan. But we need, education is important. I'm a huge advocate of education. And, particularly if I'm going to focus here on Cape Cod, it's making education more available to those that are looking for a higher education that perhaps can't do the traditional go away to college, stay in the dormitory for 4 years. And we need to link up our community college with a four-year institution with more degrees available. But it needs to be broader than that, because not all the kids on Cape Cod want to go to college. They want to go in the trades or graduating from tech schools. There's there's a need right now for folks with technical skills. And so, we need to be able to provide them that advanced education as they graduate from tech schools with those type of skills to go on to that next, that first job, where it's, sort of the equivalent of going to post-secondary education. Perhaps it's a certificate program or whatever. My neighbor, mechanic, went to Cape Cod Tech, but had to go to Rhode Island in order to get that extra training, wasn't able to continue to work. We need to provide more trades opportunities here on Cape Cod and also link up a more robust four-year program with our community colleges. I think would be a success for Cape Cod.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Mantle.
I'm probably preaching the choir here in school that education is the key to prosperity, but it's pretty remarkable that no one else so far has had any kind of ideas about how to lower the cost of education. I believe that as we move forward, what we need to do is start moving education online, and that online learning is the way in which we can flatline the rising costs, because it is the facility cost of education that is causing us to see rising tuition costs, rising fee costs. The other aspect of this is that we need to put further regulations and limitations on salaries in public universities. There's no reason why a football coach should be making $2 million. There's no reason why a public university president should be making 2 or 3 times that of our governor. If you went into education and public education, then I'm sure that you've at some point had your student loans paid off, and it quite frankly, it angers me to think that people are getting rich off the backs of student loans. So I think those are 2 ways in which we can reform education and lower and at least flatline the cost.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Crocker.
My plan is basically trying to find a way to make Cape Cod a year-round facility. What we fail to do in Massachusetts all the time is really look at our capital assets. I believe that the Massachusetts, the Cape Cod campus may have better assets than the Dartmouth campus. So it's almost time that we start having a analysis of how to move the assets around to produce better assets. For instance, if the Dartmouth campus can house beds or something that we need for the mentally ill or others, maybe that's the best use of that asset, where a clean product like a school and the university would do Cape Cod well and would match in with our economy and our environmental mindset that we have here. I remember clearly when I worked for Jack Elmer at the State House, he was our Republican senator, we had an abundance of teachers wanting to teach because they want the Cape Cod lifestyle and want to retire here. We have the horsepower to get this done. We just have to work the assets.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Kristen, and the first response will be from Mr. Seer.
Should the state consider legislation to address water pollution and estuary protection? Should the state do more to help towns who have to reduce nitrogen release?
Again, great question, and I was thinking about when we were talking about our fishery issues and challenges, especially around aquaculture and bay scallops. This is all linked. Probably one of the most important things that the next state senator is going to need to do is entirely unsexy. It's getting about $66 million in the annual budget appropriations so we can maintain zero interest loans for wastewater. Investments that we largely do not have in our communities. There's a 208 plan that's gone into effect. We're going to see in June when the towns have to submit that plan where that progress is. We need to continue to have state support to do this. These projects are hugely expensive, and I think if the 208 plan is not successful, I think we are likely to see state regulations or federal action, but I'm optimistic in the regional approach, and hopefully that won't need to happen. That would be a much bigger cost than the cost we're talking about now.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Schiavi.
As far as the regulations go, we do have regulations now that are sort of driving us to, address our wastewater and our water quality. And it's a big issue because it affects all the towns in the Cape. It's a very expensive proposition. I've read most of the 208 plan. The question is going to be, what's the best way to implement it? Because if you have 20 towns, for 15 right here on the Cape, and how do you implement it? How do you share costs? Do you regionalize? Do you create a sort of an equivalent to the NWA for the Cape? And people get scared about that because, you get 15 different entities trying to work at it. So we need to figure out what's the best approach. to handle the wastewater, to continue to protect our environment, get away from septic systems and the damage they do to our water. But we also need to look at some of the regulations that are currently being enacted. Actually, it's already enacted, called the Sustainable Water Management Initiative, which is going to penalize communities that use strictly groundwater for their drinking water. And there's some talk about whether that regulation really was meant for a place like Cape Cod versus places like the Charles River Basin or the Sudbury River Basin. And I would certainly work as a state senator to look to see whether the Cape should be exempted from that if the true meaning of it was not for the situation we have here on Cape Cod. It would be a negative impact on water withdrawal.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Manna.
Currently the Vice Chairman of the Joint Committee on the Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture. And at a recent debate, we were asked if we had the opportunity to choose which committee we'd like to chair, which would it be? And I said quite definitively that it would be that committee. And the reason why is because water and water quality is the single most important issue on Cape Cod. It, as has been suggested, may not be sexy. It's total crap, really. But we have a responsibility to fix it, because if we don't, then we're not going to have the same environment. We are on the front line of climate change, of environmental disaster here on Cape Cod. We have a sole source aquifer, and every year it gets worse. The federal plan, which is required under the 208 plan, is a great document that is currently being steered by the Cape Cod Commission. We're blessed to have some bright minds over there working on that. At this point, I don't see additional state regulation as being necessary, but more to the point, I think what we really need is cooperation among state, federal, local, county to get on top of the wastewater issue.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Crocker.
Wastewater's sexy. It's really sexy. And that's because it's the place we can make a difference immediately. In 1995, when the bills came out for Title V changes, we did not have changes in our building code for low-flow water, low-flow toilets, low-flow appliances. We are putting less water into our system, yet the DEP has never gone back and changed the flow count for all of our issues. We are overbuilding every single product when we're using the Title V standards for flow. In Barnstable, we built a double school in West Barnstable Road. For 2 years, we suffered with that septic system in default until we dug a ditch and tied in the affordable housing. We had to use the flow count from the affordable housing to make it move. Chatham just spent how many millions of dollars? They put in a 20-foot monitoring well. There's not enough flow to see the well, to see the monitoring. Better science has to come from DEP. It's the cheapest thing. We shouldn't build a thing till DEP does its job and gives us good science.
Thank you. The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
So when I ran for commissioner in 2008, this was my main issue. I ran on it and I worked it for 5 years diligently, among other things, but this was really my focus because on Cape Cod, our environment is our economy. And even I could see the degradation of our waters and our area from the time I was a child. And then living here year-round, you really see the impacts of these things. So we have done a great job at the county. The Cape Cod Commission is our lead, and it is a department of the county. And we pushed and pulled. It started with Senator Rob O'Leary, who did get the state's revolving fund to have 0% loans. No towns took it up. We did have, we went through a lot of efforts, but eventually we did lobby the state. They gave us $3 million to put together the 208. It was passed by Governor Baker in June of last year, and then by the EPA in September of last year. It is the template of going forward. We need the resources. We do have federal resources that have come in. It was the first $500,000 and then another $500,000. Once the federal government is in, it is in. But we do not have to sewer everything. We have alternatives. And our job as the county government was to give you options for policy. It can be done. It has to be done.
Thank you.
And the state and the federal government have to help us pay for it.
The next question will be from Sam, and the first response will be from Mr. Schiavi.
Should the state support the development of alternative energy sources such as solar and wind?
Yes, absolutely. I'm a large proponent of renewable energy. I've worked on a number of renewable energy projects, both solar and wind. Certainly when it comes to solar and wind, it really comes down to appropriate siting. When I was executive director at Joint Base Cape Cod, we worked on a number of wind turbines that are out there. I think folks have seen those. The base just got a $6 million grant to create the first microgrid in DOD to couple up a very large solar installation that's going on the former Cap landfill to combine with the wind energy out there. And we worked with a company that was developing technology to actually store energy, so all of it didn't need to go back to the grid to create this microgrid. So I'm a very much a proponent of all types of renewable energy, including things like hydro. We need to look outside the box. States like Oregon are putting turbines inside of the large water pipes, since any time you have flow, you can turn a turbine and create energy. So it shouldn't be just limited to solar and to wind. We should look at other types of technology, including tidal flows to create new types of renewable energy as much as we can.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Mantle.
I would agree. I think that the state should be incentivizing solar, wind, tidal. We should really be trying to grow a green economy here on Cape Cod. And there's a few reasons why we actually have a fighting chance of being a leader in this when you look at it nationally. If you consider the resource that we have in Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and the marine sciences and the creativity of people who live here on the Cape, this is an area that we can really be a leader. And so not just in solar and in wind, but in tidal and in biofuels as well. We should be using and rehabilitating our cranberry bogs that are laying in fallow and using them either as solar pads or as algae. There's a type of algae that can basically create an enzyme which produces diesel fuel. We should be doing this. There's an innovation center up in Boston that is focused on it, and I strongly support this because if we don't move away from our fossil fuel dependence, then again we're going to be beholden to other countries.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Crocker.
Thank you very much. I've actually worked on this at some great length. When the Cape Cod Commission came and started to kick off some of these solar array scenarios, I was asked by my town councilor present to run over the contract and participate as the chair of the contract. We put together such a great contract for the town of Barnstable that opened up at our landfill that it is also the model that got used here in Howard. So Howard and Barnstable have the two largest arrays. They have the same arrangement, and it comes from a contract that we made in Barnstable. Currently, when you talk about flow and pipes, I voted for the funds that are necessary to put a test pilot in the pipe, the sewer pipe, just on the corner off of Town Hall. And we are currently viewing that. We are looking at the propeller in the flow and see if we can generate enough energy out of that. We're always on top of it, and we always can do better.
Thank you. The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
So I was saying earlier today to one of the students that it's a real shame because back in 1970s we actually knew that we had this problem, and then we let ourselves be manipulated and drifted apart as to was it really human error or was it caused by natural. But whether it was natural or human, we knew it was happening. We didn't do anything about it. So we should be way ahead of ourselves because we could have been putting much more investment into renewable energies that would be more perfected today, and we wouldn't be in this situation as dire as we are. We're facing really a tipping point. So yes, we have to put all of our resources. We're going to be dismantling or shutting down Pilgrim. That is going to affect the energy provided to this area and other areas, and that energy is the void of that energy is going to be filled by coal and gas-fueled energy. And because we have not made the progress on renewables as we should have been doing for the last 30 years. I mean, we had them on the White House and they were taken down because we were Americans and we didn't have to really bow down to that. That is the attitude that we have to stop. We have to understand that we are responsible for our actions. We're paying for them now, and we have to put all of our R&D, our research and development, into developing the resources that we need, the renewable energies we need, whether they be wind, solar, whatever can come down the pike.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Seer.
I think we've already seen in Massachusetts how Massachusetts has been a leader with renewable Renewables. I think when I like to talk about renewables, really I like to paraphrase my old boss used to say Massachusetts' first fuel is energy efficiency. We've had some success here. This is a big challenge for a place like Cape Cod, where we have a lot of old homes. My parents tried to put solar panels on their house, and the beams were too wide, so they couldn't put them on. But I think energy efficiency is key. Advancing solar on homes. And then I'm really excited about the wind projects that are being proposed pretty far offshore, south of Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket. These are the 3 companies that have won the bids, or in the bids for these locations are very deeply experienced in this work. And whereas a lot of the onshore wind generation is very far from locations where we need it, right? We're talking about out west. These are very close to existing power sources, existing places where we generate power. So this is going to be a really big, exciting thing. The challenge is just going to take a decade to come on. So how do we fill the gap in the remaining years?
Thank you. The next question will be from Ashley, and the first response will be from Mr. Mail.
What role does the state have in immigration and refugee issues?
In immigration and refugee, is that what you said? I believe it's a federal issue, primarily. I believe that the state, a few years ago, we encountered an issue where we had young, undocumented individuals who were in need of basically warehousing before they could be deported. And there were some pretty horrific signs that went up, like "No Way Jose" on the rotary right over the bridge, that pretty much cast an embarrassing shadow over our community. I would like to think that as a nation that we're not about building up walls, and I'm proud to be part of a political party that tears them down, that's inclusive, and that the solution is not to point across and say that it's somebody else's problem and that they're going to pay for it. I think that when it comes to immigration, that we have to recognize that unless you're Native American, we all showed up here at one point.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Crocker.
Thank you. If it's not in the budget, I'm not going to support it. If you want to get involved with state funds in immigration, you need to set aside money to do it. We can't arbitrarily, in the middle of a scheduled budget year, start spending money we don't have. That's how we always get in trouble, that's how we spend our rainy day funds, and that's how we lose our bond rating. If it's not in the budget, we can't do it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
Well, I think that we can. I think that it is our moral obligation to do so. Sometimes it goes beyond money. And being the child of an immigrant, and my father was barely born in this country, I think that immigrants bring an appreciation to this country that some of us forget once we have been born here for several generations and things start to become easy. They are the ones that believe in this country, they're the ones that believe in the dream, and they work very, very hard to get there. As did my parents, which is why I am as passionate about this country as I am. So, and when we have refugees, we have to appreciate those children that were referred to. If you listen to stories of how the treatment of kidnapping of those children, they would be kidnapped by drug cartels and used for target practice, walking down the street and then shot. So this is what people are facing when they are refugees, and we sit here very smug saying we just can't afford that. I think we are better people than this. I think we should remember that we are better people than this and do better.
The next response will be from Mr. Seer.
So within the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, there is an Office of Refugees and Immigrants, ORI. I believe it's largely funded with federal resources. Immigrants, I think, are a huge, and ORI does a lot of really important work, for instance, with the Somali immigrant population in Worcester, really helping a lot of refugees and immigrants. I worked with them briefly from the context of meeting the needs of LGBTQ youth. I think immigrants are a really huge opportunity for us here on Cape Cod. I know we like to think of ourselves as a white picket fence place, but when you dig down a little bit in the demographics and who makes up our community, we are becoming more diverse, and I think this is a real advantage. We have a surging Brazilian community on the Mid-Cape of Cape Verdeans, Jamaicans, Bulgarians, Irish, people who come here who are enriching our communities, and I really think, and who are really demonstrating success. And so I think they're a big part of having a vibrant economy. I was talking to Jim Perlman, who's the sheriff in Nantucket. We've also got to work really hard with our immigrant communities here on Cape Cod to make sure that they get counted in the next census. There's a huge undercount in Nantucket. Thousands of people are not counted in the official population, and we need to do a better job working with immigrant communities to make sure they are counted so we can get resources for them.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Schiavi.
So as it relates to immigrants, we all came from somewhere. My family came over from Italy, and to me it's more about, proper immigration and following our immigration rules and laws for the United States when folks do come over here. Because we are a community that's made up of immigrants, frankly. But local law enforcement cannot enforce, federal immigration laws. If they find an illegal immigrant, they have to call a federal agent to come in, and then they determine the status of that individual. What we need to do is try to encourage those folks to get into the proper channels, to get properly documented, get proper papers, to be here, to stay here. When I was on Nantucket, I heard from a number of people what they call over there an underground workforce exists of folks that came over, they're not documented, overstayed their visa, now they're undocumented. They're working and then they're looking to try to get services from the communities where they are, which is taking services away from those that frankly have put into that and perhaps more deserving because they're from there. So I think we just need to encourage them to get into the proper immigration channels and get documented and go through the process to be here legally, and they will be welcomed.
Thank you.
Are we going to readdress 30 seconds?
Yes, absolutely. That will start with Mr. Mann.
No, I have no rebuttal.
I hope tonight we're seeing some distinct differences between us. I'm not suggesting that it shouldn't be in the budget. I'm suggesting that if it isn't in the budget, it shouldn't be spent. We need to have discussions about how our money is spent. We need to manage our money and manage our assets, and we need to follow the rules. If we have a desire to put the budget together and account for it, put it in the budget and it gets spent. But we can pick up these expenses without being accountable to the taxpayer. Thank you.
Next response will be from Ms. Watkins.
I agree with that, but I also think that we have to be considering that these are going to be costs that are going to be coming to us. And there is going to be a day that we may be refugees, climate refugees. We live on a coastal region that is there. It is right at sea level. We could become refugees. People of Massachusetts can become refugees. We are going to have to either move to our other states or other countries. We've got to be prepared for these instances now and for our future.
Next response will be from Mr. Sear.
So my understanding, and I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding is a lot of the resources that go towards immigrant communities come from a federal level. So really having a really good count of what the needs are in that community is really going to help us. Even funding for programs such as WIC, which I've talked to healthcare providers, the WIC program on Nantucket really struggles because they really have an undercount. So I think it's really important for us to be honest and to know who's in our community. The other language that I just want to caution, and Tony, I know you didn't mean it in this way, but I think we have to be careful around language about who's more deserving. If we used a criteria to say, well, only native Cape Codders and Nantucketers and Islanders kind of get this and others don't, a lot of Washington shores would be out of luck, and I don't think that's fair.
The next response will be from Mr. Sear.
A friendly comment.
No, that's okay, and thank you for doing that, because I want to make a distinction between, folks that have immigrated perhaps or illegal immigrants, and I think there's a difference between refugees. I don't think Massachusetts is overloaded with refugees per se. I think it's people that have come here because of family, whatever, looking for jobs, and came over here, and perhaps they just don't know how to get through the process, and I think that's where we need to start, because again, we have great communities that have been built here on Cape Cod and the islands that are thriving, that are smart, they're business people. We want to encourage other ones to sort of come out of the darkness of illegal immigration to be properly documented and welcomed into our country.
Thank you. The next question will be from Maggie, and the first response will be from Mr. Crocker.
Do you support the new Massachusetts law and President Obama's letter to schools on transgender rights?
I support everyone's position for privacy and respect everyone's position that they need privacy. I do not support what came down from the Obama administration. What came down from the Obama administration was very careless and took no accounting of the different types of facilities that they were mandating change to. You can't look at an old school and a new school like this lovely facility and suggest that there aren't different standards in the locker rooms. So we just can't change ourselves and mandate that it's tied to everyone's funding without an immediate understanding that there may be funding necessary to invoke the change. So the way it's written, the way it came down, I do not agree with it.
The next response will be from Ms. Lyons.
Well, I do support it, and I think it's just basically just to, let's get this question answered. There are times since the transgender, I think transgender is something that has, some people are afraid of. Transgender is something that conjures something to do with sexual behavior, and it's not a question of sex or sexual behavior. It is a person's identity. So we have to respect that. I wonder how many times I've been in a ladies' room with a person who is transgender and I didn't know it. And I was just over at the Harwich Community Center, and they have 2 bathrooms there outside the thing, and it has a male and a woman on it with a wheelchair. And I said, gee, isn't that simple? So there are ways of doing this without making it a big deal. I think it's just respecting people and actually understanding that this question of transgender has really nothing to fear about sex or sexual behavior. It is personal identity.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Seaver.
So the guidance that the Obama administration released actually started here in Massachusetts. It's been in effect for 5 years. The sky has not fallen, and most of the superintendents, principals, teachers that I've talked to, and I've worked extensively on this issue, really have found the Massachusetts guidance and the subsequent Obama guidance to be very helpful. Young people, students are presenting and coming out as transgender. A young person in my own family has come out as transgender, and schools need common sense resources around how to accommodate a student who is transitioning their gender at age 16 or 14 or in elementary school. I'm really proud of the fact that under my leadership, when I was chair of the state's commission on LGBTQ youth, we worked collaboratively with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and community stakeholders to put out this first in the nation guidance. It has made a difference in the lives of countless individuals, and just to tell you why we do this, suicidality among trans and broadly LGBTQ youth, you're talking about 3 or 4 times the rate of the broader youth population. And so this is really, really important, but it's common sense, and it's really a helpful tool for our schools.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Seaver.
Well, first of all, I believe in equality for everybody. Nobody should be discriminated against. I know we focus a lot on the bathroom and locker room part of this bill, but it also includes, hotels and hospitals and restaurants, because nobody should be discriminated against. But when you get into private areas, when I looked at the Massachusetts bill as it's currently going through, I do have some concerns about how the implementation of that is going to occur. And I don't have any personal experience in this area, but I've been reading and looking at things, and there was a recent article in an opinion paper in a Metro West Daily News this past weekend from a transgendered male who is just as nervous about this as perhaps anybody else, because they fear it as well. And their solution was we go to single-user facilities, and that's the solution, because I think both sides of this, no matter where you are, it's going to be uncomfortable. And when we get into private areas, privacy becomes a real concern, especially in open locker rooms. And so how is it going to be implemented in our schools and other places? And so I think that needs to be talked about more and refined more before we take this bill any further and get it signed into law. We need to take a look at how that's going to happen so we don't end up putting people in a bad situation unintentionally.
Thank you. The next response will be from Mr. Mann.
So for the 4 years that I've been in the state legislature, I've been an advocate for LGBTQ issues and rights. I believe that this is the civil rights issue of our day, and I believe that transgender people deserve protection under the law. So I definitely support President Obama's initiative in this regard. To Julian's point, he's correct. We have adopted standards, and there really would be no change here in Massachusetts. But I've been a co-sponsor of the legislation that is currently in front of the House, and I definitely plan to support it. I've supported past legislative efforts in the past session. But I think that one of the things that is nice about tonight's discussion is that there isn't much fear-mongering. But I can tell you, up in the State House, the argument that is made against this is that these people are sexual deviants and that they're dangerous and they're predators. And it's absolutely not true. It's actually, it maligns the reality of the fact, which is that these people are far more likely to be the subject of bullying than to be the bullies or to be the people who are doing any harm. So I certainly support it, and I can't wait to see the Massachusetts legislature pass it next week.
Due to time limitations, we will have to end our questions here and ask the candidates to make their concluding statements. You will have 90 seconds each, and they will begin with Ms. Lyon.
Thank you, everyone. It's pretty hard to really kind of get out how you feel about things with such a short time frame. I have been elected. I have worked for 10 years serving Cape Cod and the islands. Well, I have actually did serve the islands because I worked with them on homeless issues and substance abuse. In that time, I served on the Assembly of Delegates for 2 years. I saw the county as a great vehicle to be able to help this region. I believe that I've made a good contribution in helping the county realize what it should be doing and the regional impact and looking at how we can bring towns together, build cooperation, collaboration, and consensus. We have made great progress in the areas of wastewater, technology. I was the person who fought for the Open Cape to come through here. It has not been fully actualized, and that is something that is being worked on now, still with the county. I would like to see more progress on that, and I will support that as a senator. This is a leadership position, and it is a position of someone who has worked from born to Provincetown and with the islands in mind. You have to understand that the Cape has very similar problems that can be addressed in different ways depending on where you are on our peninsula. And we do share many common interests with the islands. I feel prepared. I ran for the seat 6 years ago. People said to me, "You need more experience." I have worked hard. I feel prepared. I am here to be your senator, and I'm here to be your female senator. So I thank you.
Thank you. The next concluding statement will come from Mr. Sear.
Wasn't expecting that. Thank you so much for Monomoy and the entire team of students here for hosting us tonight. This has been a real pleasure to be up here with all 5 of us. Before I end tonight, I do want to set one thing straight that wasn't mentioned tonight. In my campaign and doing our due diligence, we did come across something in the public record that we found was odd, and that we did decide. I made a decision to disclose that information. I very much understand why my opponent and colleague Brian Mantle is upset about this, and what happened has caused reaction, and I don't want this to be a distraction. I am tremendously and profoundly humbled and grateful to be up here, not only with all of you, but in a room with students who I think have asked actually some of the most intelligent, tough questions that I've certainly gotten on this campaign trail. And so I just really look forward to the months ahead. And I would just say to all the folks in the audience, but especially those of you still in school or just out of school, that really getting involved in politics can be a really tremendously rewarding opportunity. We need you to do it. There's a very exciting moment that's happening across the Cape and Islands where a lot of young folks are jumping in and doing this, and regardless of the outcome of these specific races, I think it makes for I just think having all of us part of our community in this together, it's what's going to address the challenges we're facing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The next concluding statement will come from Mr. Schiavi.
Well, first off, thank you everybody for your attention tonight. Thank you all for the great questions and a very enlightening evening. I have been in public service for more than 30 years. I consider myself a public servant. I've raised a family here on Cape Cod. I've been here for 24 years. Our grandchildren are being raised here as fourth-generation Cape Codders right here in Harwich. And I knew I had more to give to the benefit of everybody on Cape Cod, from the tip all the way up to Mashpee and also the islands. And I bring with that a tremendous amount of experience, a tremendous amount of leadership experience, but also a tremendous amount of accomplishments, both in the military right here on Cape Cod, but also in local government, and which shows the ability to work on very complex issues that affect a lot of people, that have to be worked on bipartisanly to be able to accomplish those things. And I think I have the right skill set, the right mindset, the right vision to lead in our state senate for the Cape and Islands to address the things that I think, as I hear along the campaign trail, that matter most to people. Things like jobs, things like housing, things like the economy, the opiate issue, our economic growth, all of that, making sure we maintain strong public safety and public schools. I know that I can work on all of those things and make very positive contributions to that, because I've demonstrated an ability to do that over many years of public service. People today, what I hear out there is they want to pick a person, and we're all great people and great skill sets, but they're going to be looking, I think, for that person that they know will make the right decisions. They'll make tough decisions, no matter how difficult they might be, to bring real solutions that need to happen for our Cape and Islands district. And I know that I can do that as your state senator, and I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. The next concluding statement will come from Mr. Manow.
So, to the panelists and to our moderator, and obviously I think there's one person in this room who deserves a round of applause, which is Sarah, with her hands up like this all night. I think that when it comes down to this position, what we have here is a tremendous opportunity. And Cape Cod is a place that is so special to me. I grew up here. I moved back here to raise my kids here, and I wanted to be near my folks. I started a business here. I've been an attorney. I've practiced law. And for the past 4 years, I've had an amazing experience as a state representative. I want to take the work that I've been doing there, and I don't want to replace Dan Wolf, because we're all running for the seat that is currently held by Dan Wolf, but I'm not going to replace him. I'm going to continue the work that I've been doing already up in the State House. And I think that when it comes down to it, to address issues, you will never hear character attacks out of me. My campaign will not benefit and will not engage in anything that tears anyone else down, because we've got far too many important issues. And so, moving forward, I hope that all of us on the stage can abide by that, and that we can appreciate the fact that the people who are here in this audience don't care about the character attacks, but what they want to see is someone who has the leadership and political courage to do the right thing, not the popular thing, to take hard positions and to fully dedicate themselves to this position. And that's me. I've got the experience, the education, and the ties to our community, and I'm ready to step up to the next level to become your next state senator. Thank you.
Thank you. The next concluding statement will come from Mr. Crawford.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for everybody who came out tonight. It's real important to understand what our candidacies are all about. As a job creator, I've created jobs in real estate, construction. I've created jobs in engineering, civil engineering, and healthcare, day surgery center, and hotel-motel properties. I've created jobs in a number of areas which are all acceptable to the Cape lifestyle. We need to thrust the Cape lifestyle forward. We need to drop the barriers and do some good. If I'm fortunate enough to be your next state senator, I'll make two promises to you. Regionally, I will develop what I call committees that will come forward and assist me and tell me what it is that is the obstacle of the day by the state. We need to know in all our industries, bipartisan in every way, what it is that is the obstacle for them doing business, the type of business we want on Cape Cod. Secondly, I will be the legislator that promises that my first bill every year will be a cost-cutting measure. What a novel idea to have a legislator working for you whose first bill every year is a cost-cutting measure. I can't thank you enough for hearing us today, and thanks to my panel.
All right, thank you. I'd like to thank the candidates for joining us at this debate tonight. I'd like to thank the student panel of questioners, Sam Morand, Ashley Benson, Maggie O'Donnell, and Kristen Siegel. technicians, Miriam Masad, Grace Fernandez, and Amanda Kulskog. Our camera operator, Andy Howard. Our camera handlers, Eric Sherman, Katie Barr, Emily Lyford, Grace Fernandez, Sarah McCaskill. Our ushers, our media handlers, Anna Milan. And thank you also to the school administrators and to all of you in attendance. I would also like to ask each candidate to come up one at a time. I have a shirt for you. I'll start with Mr. Sear.
Thank you.
Mr. Schiavi. Mr. Crocker.
Hopefully it's big enough. That's something for our moderator too.
This is wonderful, so thank you very much. And you did a great job in the school.
Please give a final round of applause to our candidates.
All right.
Can we get one picture of